Okay, so quick recap. I was recording to the wrong folder for those of you watching at home. So again, like this is just a mess in my timeline, but the animation is okay. And so there's a couple of ways you could go into this. You could go in there and manually figure out each curve, right? Or we could sort of go back a few steps to where we knew it was solid and sort of rework it from there. Now, I'm going to do that second one, and the reason for that is sometimes when you come back to it, you look at it and you go, oh, you know what, that pose could be way better. And although you can make those changes at this point, it was way easier to make those changes in the blocking pass, right? So I currently have all my controls selected. Just to make this a little easier on me, I'm going to make a button where I can select them as well. So let's go ahead and hit stop there. I'll open up my script viewer here, or my script editor, and edit, clear all. I will choose head squash anim, go all the way to the bottom, hold shift and choose up spine IK anim. Right, and so now I have that to select my entire rig. No. And I will, just so people at home can see. Save all, oops, there we go. So now I have this button that will allow me to select the entire rig. And if we choose our controls, you can see it. I don't know, some of you maybe have used this rig before. I actually really like this rig. For a cartoony rig, it's actually pretty good. It's not all the controls are exactly the way you would want to manipulate a certain attribute, but you can still get good poses and stuff like that out of it. So I kind of like it.
Does it work with lip sync or no?
It will. It's I will show you really quickly on that. It is a different lip sync setup. It's sort of an older one. A lot of people call these joysticks, which is there's nothing on the face that lets me control it. It's all these little controls over here that sort of build a the ability to. Why is it doing this?
How does he render? Does he render the two? That makes sense.
Huh. Sorry, this is, oh, I bet it's some of these here I have turned on, yeah. No. So that's working. He renders okay. I don't know why the face rig is not working for me right now though. That is troubling.
I'm actually using this rig too in my FaceTime project, and it does that. I have no idea why. Sometimes all it takes is to
start.
Yeah, to reload the DNA file.
Just reload it, you said?
Yeah.
So let's try that. I bet that's what it is too.
It usually happens after you move other controls on the rig, and then it just decides to be temperamental because you didn't give that enough attention. It's just like,
That's all right. Well, so we'll do this. I'm going to rename mine anyway to Willie Anim Revised. Save as. Okay, that's all right. Oh, current file type cannot be changed. That's okay. I'm okay with an MA. There we go. Why not? Oh. I wonder if that drive is full. Huh. Save scene as. Let's just go ahead and put it on my desktop temporarily here. No. Let's not. Let's go ahead and put it on my D. Red and glass. bet that's what it is. The faculty folder is full. Let me delete some stuff out of this in a minute. Okay, so let's reopen that now. File, open scene. Do you usually have to close Maya all the way?
Not all the way, just reload the
Oh yeah, there it goes. So you can kind of see now, like he's got like some pretty decent mouth controls, but you kind of have to interpret them of what they are. So this setup, a lot of people call it a joystick setup. It's like you've got this control set over here, and you sort of have to remember what each of these little things do. Like that's his tongue apparently, and then these are his eyebrows. But yeah, it works okay. Like you can, I mean, it's got all the elements you need for it. In fact, I'm thinking about using, if I can get it set up in time, I'm thinking about using him for the lip sync project that we're going to do in this class. I have a line of a guy who has a Muppet voice, and I kind of want to do that.
Is it the dude from Superstore?
It is.
Is it the manager guy?
Yeah, what is these? It's the coffee line. Like there's a great line about coffee, and it's funny. So we have all of that on him. But my real issue here is that all of this stuff is just hard to interpret now, right? And if I were just going to polish, if I was like, this is perfect, I just need a little bit more polish on it, I would just go ahead and jump straight back into the curves. But in most cases, when you're at this point, it's just worth pushing it a little bit and doing, I mean, like you've probably gotten better at posing since the last time you worked on this shot. So it's worth going through and like reevaluating if you want to push certain areas. And the problem with that is if you start changing the whole pose, you're creating a new key pose where you may have offset something already, and you're just going to start getting these weird hitches and stuff that you have to clean up later. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the things I want to keep, and I'm going to rekey those, right? So I'll show you an example of how you can do this strategically, right? Let's say like the only area I really wanted to keep was, or one of the areas I wanted to push was this right here, right? Like maybe I wanted to push that pose, right? Well, I have everything selected. I can just hit S and make sure I get a key pose on all of that, and then go ahead and push this pose however I feel like I need to, right? And I can exaggerate it even more, maybe stretch this leg out even more, right? Like I can exaggerate just on this one pose, and now I have that. But again, like it's a big transition from here to here, right? And so one of the things, I'm actually going to undo some of that I just did. Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah, so that's not bad. So another way we can do this is a little bit more aggressive, which is I want to be able to just decide which poses to delete, right? So let's say if I needed to change a section of animation, right? Let's say I'm not happy from, why is my background continuing to disappear? I have it turned on, whatever. So let's say I wanted to, and there it was. So let's say I wanted to change the section from here on frame 31 to here on frame, let's say 60, right? I could just go ahead and select everything, put a keyframe on 60, put a keyframe on 31, and wipe out this part in between, right? Delete. And so now all of this isn't as good, but that means I get to recreate my breakdown there, right? And so my breakdown may have been that I wanted this foot to all the, like on frame 45.
Is this in step mode or is what?
Yeah, I can go to step mode, and I probably will here in a minute, but like this will kind of let me get some ideas on that. Like maybe I really wanted to change that breakdown. I can do like that. And so then I get this pose, and I can really start changing my breakdown of how this animation happens, right? Maybe it's more like this. Let me roll him up on his heel a little bit more. Maybe I wanted him to drag his body more like this, right? And so now I got a completely different breakdown. Wait, stupid auto key. Gets me every time. So I could do like this drag of his body like this to make him feel like he's reaching with that foot. Sort of roll him up on his heel. Push him down a little bit more. And like maybe get a quick eye glance. Where are his eyes again? These? Oh.
I think it might be the old ones at the top box.
No, those are the eyebrows, right?
Yeah, I think so. What's this? So his lids. Oh, sorry, it's this thing out here. So get a quick glance back here, right? And so just in my breakdown now, I've changed that, right? And so you can make some big changes to your animations that just improve it, right? If you need to wipe out a section, make poses stronger, rework a section, I've pretty much taken frames 31 through 60 back to the blocking pass. And now I can hone in on that section. I could go to 31 through 60, and I can just make this section much better, right? So that's one of the ways we can polish and without destroying our entire animation, without having to try to make this one little area sort of blend back into it. I pretty much chopped this out and fixed that. Yes?
Random question. I haven't done this before, but what happens if you change the other value from 185 down to 60 instead? That wouldn't wipe out the animations past 60.
It doesn't wipe them out. It just changes what my range slider thinks exists. So right now I can grab this and sort of extend it out. But no, it doesn't wipe them out. It just sort of trims the range that you're going to be working on for this shot. Yeah, I mean that number can go way up to there. I know 3D Studio Max used to have a limit of 10,000 frames. I don't think Maya has that limit. There are certain things that stop working after 10,000 frames, I think, like simulation maybe. But they may have even changed that since then. So I've made these changes, and now I can just work on this section, right? If I really want to drag with or lead with the lower part of the body, I can continue to add this, maybe reaching with this hand a little bit more, right? And so really what I'm doing is I'm taking sections of my animation back to the blocking pass, because sometimes that's where the error is, right? Sometimes what you're needing to do is make the blocking pass a little better, right? And I know that sounds like that sounds sort of like antithetical to making progress, but it is so much easier to clean up a shot that is strong than it is to clean up a shot that is weak, right? And so if you have strong poses, in betweening those strong poses is not a lot of work. If you have weak poses, it's very unclear, right? Like what you're supposed to be doing, how do you improve it? It already is just mediocre, right? So pushing those things to where they're strong makes your cleanup process usually go faster. And so that's just something to kind of think about, is if there's an area that's just feeling like a problematic area, you can go back in and completely clean that up. So again, if I haven't really made this part clear, what I'm focusing on here is addressing the problem areas in a shot that you're revising that relate to staging, posing, and sort of that early pass of those things you were figuring out then, right? When you first started, sometimes like you just get further down the road and you realize there were issues there, right? So I'm going to show you another way in which we can get our entire shot back to blocking a little more quickly, right? And this one is very destructive, so sort of bear with me on it. Let's say that I just need to get my entire shot back to my keys or maybe even my breakdowns, right? Well, what I'm going to do is, instead of going through there and having to manually set all of those keys like I did earlier, because there's a lot of mess in here. Like, I don't know which of these 4 was my original key pose, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake out all of my keyframes. I'm going to put a keyframe on every frame of this animation, and then I'm just going to delete the things I don't need. And the reason for that is then I know everything that needs a keyframe has it, and I can go back to stepped mode, like Parker was talking about, in order to fix that, right? So I have everything on the rig selected. I'm going to go up to, I think it's, oh, I always use this. Yeah, edit, and then keys, and I'm going to hit bake simulation. There we go. So you'll notice that every control on my character has a keyframe on every frame of the animation, which sounds kind of like, why would you do that, Greg? It's because I'm trying to get this back to my blocking pass, right? And let's say that there were, I don't know, 10 or 12 key poses that were my blocking pass, and I just feel like I could go back to that phase and make the entire thing stronger by pushing each of those poses, right? So one of the things I can do here is, so pose 1, if pose 1 is sort of where I wanted to start, right, probably is, I would go until my next key pose, which I would think would probably be my next contact, probably right there, right? So I know that pose 1 is my first, frame 14 is my second, so I can just highlight everything in between and delete it. Right? I can continue on, like let's say my next key pose.
Well, that way you don't have anything that's offset.
Right.
Everything's, I'm sorry, what button did you click to bake it?
It's under edit, keys, and then bake simulation.
And you selected all of the, wrote that down.
Yeah, I just selected all the controls, and basically what it did, if you go look in your graph editor for this, so there's a keyframe on everything.
That's all.
Now this is interesting, and I'll probably even go back to this phase, because this is what motion capture data looks like. And so if you ever have to work with motion capture data, this is very beneficial to know, right? Like this, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to undo a few steps here in a minute, and I'm going to show you ways of messing with very messy data and how we can sort of get that back to some moderately clean data.
Is that why motion capture can sometimes look kind of cheap? Like,
yeah, it's because they'll be like, this is very smooth, but motion capture will have little bitty like things like this in it. Right? Little bitty like, and it's because we kind of have noise in the way we move, but animators have a tendency to clean that up a little bit for clarity reasons, right? So again, like this is my key pose here. Maybe I want to make my up pose another key pose, so 31. So I'll delete frames 30 through 31.
so basically you're just reading in between.
I'm just getting back to my blocking, right? Which is sometimes it feels crazy. It feels like you're taking like 3 steps back. But like some of the decisions you made at this phase may have not been the right ones. And if that's the case, this may be the cleanest and, believe it or not, the fastest way of fixing it. So like if this key pose here were just all wrong, right? Like he's got the wrong foot down, right? Or he's supposed to be facing in a different direction. This method may give me the opportunity to just go back to this and fix it, right? Again, we don't have to do this with everything. I could do this with just the first half of the animation or something like that. All of this is things that we can kind of use as tools in our toolbox to fix this. So I'm going to undo a few steps because I want to show you what this was like before we baked it and how we can also still fix some stuff. Yeah, here we go. So this was before we baked the animation. Right? I'm actually going to open up a second version of Maya to talk about this part.
So like, how do you, like, starting out, his space controls are hidden. Where are they? They're in the channel box.
I'm sorry, what now? The face control?
The face control are hidden,
yeah, I think it may be that eye right over here, because that's like the eye thing next to his head. I think that's like the visibility, and you can see like the eye control visibilities are there. So. Okay, so I'm going to do a pretty simple animation on this one here. That's good, 55. So now we should have bouncing cube, playback speed, real time. The perfectionist in me, that's driving me nuts. So I gotta make it better, sorry. Okay. So I just have this box bouncing in place, right? And I have keyframes all across my timeline. And we already know how to use the graph editor to make changes to this, right? Like if I wanted this box to move forward, I could probably go ahead and grab, translate X, right? And I could delete these keys, right? And I could have it move forward over time instead, right? So we're sort of aware of how the graph editor works. That now I get this box bouncing forward, right? And so that's cool, but sometimes like your data is so complicated. Like with a box, that's easy to make that change. What if I had a character that was walking in my animation, they were walking from here to that door, and the director was like, wrong door. And I'm like, really? Because I've been working on this for a month. And like, those are some major changes. So what I want to show you how to do is use animation layers to correct parts of your animation, okay? This is used really heavily in motion capture cleanup, but we can start using these in a lot of ways in our work as well, right? So let's, I'll come back to this, but let's, yeah, I know where I'm gonna come back to. So the way animation layers works is I have all of these keyframes in my graph editor, right? that affect my translate XYZ, rotate XYZ, right? And like to change my translate X, I'm just going to affect that one curve, but like sometimes just figuring out that process or figuring out that path or that like what would result in the right motion is hard to understand on that curve. So this isn't a replacement for a graph editor. It's sort of an addition to it. So I'm going to minimize this, and over here in Anim, at the very bottom of my channel box, like we know our display layers where we can put stuff in there. Animation layers are going to work a little differently. So first you have to select something, and I have my box selected, it's already animated, and if I click this right here, this little layer with a circle on it, it's going to create a layer from the selected object. And it's actually going to create two layers. You'll notice over there I have my base layer, and you'll notice I have my box selected and there's no keyframes on my timeline anymore, right? All of my keyframes are on my base layer now, right? So my base layer is that animation I just created. This layer, animation layer 1, has no keyframes on it. And I can set more keyframes on this layer. So let's say what I wanted was I wanted my box to sort of roam around my scene. Right? I can create that on this layer just in the same way I would animate any object moving around a scene. So I'll call this it's an A, wondering. So I can just go in here on frame 1 and hit, while wondering is selected, hit S, and I can make it move maybe over to here, hit S, but then maybe it sort of changes directions, goes over to here, and then over to here. And then, so now what we have is this other layer of animation that is just these 4 keyframes that's applied on top of my bouncing animation.
So is this like a recommended workflow in like film animation? Like this? It's really cool. Like,
I mean, really, what I would say is this is a recommended workflow wherever you can use it. Like it's not like different people work different ways on things that are beneficial for them. I use this a lot for correcting things, but you can use it however you think would benefit you. Anybody know Miguel Caffey? He graduated here a couple semesters ago. This was his preferred way of working with everything. He would do a very sort of stiff pose to pose animation, and then he would go into his layers to add stuff he would have a whole layer for the eyes just to do the blinks. I couldn't work that way personally, but you can use this. Let's say the director comes back and says, hey, all of the eye blinks are too high or too big, right? Then you may be able to just go in there and create an animation layer where you just pull them all down with one keyframe, right? So with this one keyframe, I took this little box and now I'm guiding it around my scene, right? Now here's the cool thing. I can turn that off at any point I want to. I've not done anything to my original base animation keys.
So cool.
So if you look at the base animation, I have 2 sets of keyframes now, right? I have my translate Y is not changing any at all, but over here I'm moving my object all the way around the scene, however, right? So this can be really beneficial, particularly if your character is doing something and yeah, well, like anything, and you need to change it, right? Let's say you have a motion capture data of a character punching, but they're punching the wrong height, right? You can just go in there and set a couple of keyframes that make them punch higher, right? And so it's easy ways of correcting things. So, for example,
organizing stuff. It seems like.
Yeah. So, for example, let's say right here. Let's turn off my grid so we can see this a little bit better.
I mean, what you just did, like, normally I would go in and like set a keyframe where like the dude just hopped it, but like you were able to do that. Like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's kind of neat. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I get very easy to get confused on it sometimes, so you kind of have to be a little careful with it. Let's put a color on here we can see. That's not as harsh. Excuse me. So let's say that one of the things I needed was my character to jump onto this box in one of these, right? So let's say like let's do it right there. Right? That's where he's going to jump onto a box and then continue along his path. But right now he's hitting underneath the box. Right? So I can go in here and grab my box right here, right? And in the channel box I can create a new layer, and I can call this one platform correction, right? And so on frame 19, everything up to frame 19 I'm okay with. So without making any changes at all, I'm just going to hit S. That means I'm okay with it there. Like I'm not. That's sort of like a placeholder. Like that everything before frame 19 is fine and it doesn't need to change. And actually everything after frame 37 is fine as well. So I can hit S. It's really right there, right? When it hits the ground there. That's the one that's wrong. And so I can go in here and just put one more keyframe where it lands on top of the box there. Right? And so this is the animation I get now. Right? So I was just able to like quickly correct that one little issue. Now again, here's all the cool parts about all of this. All of this is still non-destructive. Right? Those layers are something I can turn off. Right? Interestingly, those layers are something I can turn down. Like if I don't want 100% of that correction, I just wanted like 50% of it, I have this weight option in here.
Keyframe that too.
And you can keyframe that weight. So this gets really like complicated. Basically that graph editor that was freaking you all out in Animation Fundamentals, what I just told you is you can have infinite graph editors. And that sounds very scary when you learn it early on, but it really becomes an element to control things.
To simplify it though, talking about cleaning up your graph editor.
Right. So here's one of the ways I use it though, is like, I still like being able to have that fine control inside of the graph editor, right? So what I'm going to do, let me go ahead and make sure, turn that back on, is like sometimes I just want to get this all back down to one layer, right? So once I have it at this point, I can highlight all of these channels and I can right click in here and say merge layers. And so if I choose my options box, I'm going to be careful here. Because if I leave it in the default settings, I think it gets like it bakes it on every keyframe. I want this to do a smart bake, right? And smart bake is going to reduce the number of keyframes it generates, but it's going to delete all my layers except for the base layer, and it's going to try to maintain this exact same animation. So if I hit merge, takes it a second, but now my keyframes, like the animation should still be the same, right? But now my keyframes and my graph editor are different.
So it put them all on the same...
It just merged all of the changes down and generated one curve that has like some pretty decent stuff in it. Like some of this is a little ugly, right? And I probably want to go through and clean that up. But this is super beneficial as a way of fixing stuff. Yes, Parker.
You could have...
No, you're excited. I like it.
But you could have cleaned this up in the layers and then merged it and it would have been fine, right? Like, or no? Is it like a part of...
Anything you do in the layers, it'll merge it down. I can't promise that the curves it generates are super clean. You may still want to go back and clean them up.
It might be just like an artifact almost of...
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me kind of show you how this is useful to you in terms of cleaning up your shot. Right? So we have Willie walking around the scene, right? I'm going to go ahead and grab all of his controls. That's probably overkill. I'm going to go to the animation layers, create a new animation layer. And so let's say I'm okay with this pose, right? But I would really like it to be a little stronger maybe. Maybe I'll go ahead
When you
and
created that, it had your base layer and it puts another one on top of it, right?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. And so we'll call this like pose push, right? So like on pose 1 here, if I make a change to this, it's going to affect all of the rest of the animation, right? Like if I just made a change here like this, then that means for the rest of the animation he's doing it like this, like sort of bent over.
Because of that layer.
Because I only have one keyframe on that layer, right? So what I did is I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe on everything here, but where I want him to sort of be back to his basic again, I would maybe like, if I'm okay with frame 30, I'll maybe go ahead and pin down frame 30. And then on frame 1, then I can push this and exaggerate some of these elements.
Like the director says he wants them hunched over more. You just
Right.
and done.
And so I fixed that, and now he still sort of gets back to this same location he was here earlier, right? So like what I did here where I dragged him earlier, maybe I want to exaggerate that again, but I really want to get back to here or something close to this afterwards, right? So I'll go ahead and hit S there, and again, I can go into here and start pushing elements here to make this even clearer. Right? This.
I'm with you.
Did you pick the right time to come back to 3D, Parker?
I did.
Okay.
I'm thinking about that efficiency, it's gonna make that dragging so much easier.
Yeah, that's
So
one of the
you can do a pass just with your masses, and then you can do overlapping action like this, like and like
Yeah.
drag and all that.
You can do drag. Like for me, overlapping action, one of the benefits is being able to set, or being able to offset your curves. And so that's going to be a little more complicated inside of the animation layers. But yeah, that is right. So I just made this change to this pose now, right? It should feel a little bit better onto there. I'm okay with this pose, but I really would like to exaggerate it too. Actually, all the way through to maybe there, because I like this pose, right? But maybe all of this stuff on the wall, let's say I wanted to exaggerate that further and make him much more like he's sneaking around and a little bit more like nervous. So maybe I would flatten his back out against the wall a little bit more, maybe stretch him up a little bit more.
And like employers don't care as long as you get like the end result. Like,
There are some technical issues with doing it this way. If you're going to be exporting it, like some rigs may be a little bit confused by this, but not in most cases. Yeah.
as long as you merged all the layers before you exported it, wouldn't it treat it the same way?
Yeah. Well, it's more like if there's a set-driven key or something driving something, the animation layer may get confused about that or something. I've never had an issue with it, and I've used some really complicated rigs. I've used really complicated rigs where the people I was working with said, probably shouldn't use animation layers. And I was like, okay, and I used them anyway. And nothing exploded. That doesn't mean stuff won't explode for you, but you know. So like you can see pretty quickly, I'm just going through here and really pushing all of this. I get this like really like, now he's much more like nervous there. I'm not saying I'm making it better, but just kind of as an example, like maybe I wanted to push this jump up in the air higher. I would start here.
But still, it's so much quicker. Like, all you have to do is go in and like tweak, or you can add another layer.
Maybe.
Damn! Like,
Yeah.
I think you might have Parker's attention.
And so if I wanted to push him up higher, I could grab some of this stuff and like really push him up higher, right? And again, I'm doing all of this just by like exaggerating those layers. So again, the cool part about all of this is whenever I decide I don't like that, or maybe I decided I pushed everything too much, I could turn this off,
Or just pull the weight down.
or I could pull the weight down, or like one of the ones I don't think was working that well. Actually the honest way of fixing it is probably to fix that keyframe. Like I'm not super happy with that. Oh, actually I know why. That's because I put it there and not there.
When he steps down, you want him
Yeah, I won't copy from there and paste it to there. Oh, went on everything though. There we go. So now it feels a little bit more exaggerated. I still feel like I could probably exaggerate like right here a little bit. I know his arm's messing up. I'm not going to worry about that. That's just the oiler filter. But maybe here I would continue to build in some of that drag in this. Right? And so now it's really much more exaggerated, right?
It's terrific. It's like.
But again, like let's say the director comes back and says, a little too much. I can nudge this. Give him a second. He'll be all right. I can take this down to like 0.5, and now all my exaggerations are a little less exaggerated, right? However, again, like the polish pass, the splining pass, really to me is still, I want to say easiest when you're polishing individual curves on one layer. So for me, what I would probably end up doing once I got all of this in there is I would go in there and select all of this, and then I would merge these layers back down together.
All the controls to merge.
Well, whatever. I guess I really didn't need to do that because it already knows which ones are on there. But then I right click on this, merge layer, and do this smart bake, and hit merge. And it kind of samples all of it. And you'll see my graph or my timeline will probably get some extra keyframes in there.
It's giving you some stars.
Yeah, maybe it was.
1.96.
Yeah. So there we go. But now I get all of that in one layer, and I can go through here in my graph editor and fix each of these curves now.
Okay.
Yes?
Would it help if you fixed the graphs before you merged them? Would that do anything with that? It's not even right.
It will, but really what it's going to do is sample it, and sometimes it's going to get, like when we had that bouncing ball earlier, did I close that down? Like, it gave me these two keyframes here, and I think no matter what I would have done in the graph editor in the individual layers, it probably would have still seen that like that. And so really to me, I still need this pass where I delete that and probably flatten these two just to make that read a little more clearly, and then work on my tangent there maybe. So like you can, but I think you're still going to end up with a couple of small spots that are a little wonky. So like the really cool part about this is what can happen once you let's say you have decided not to go back to blocking. Let's say what's happened instead, you've looked at this and said it just needs a little bit of pizzazz somewhere, right? It needs a little bit of an extra appeal. The cool thing about it is the little things that you can do with this, right? Like let's say I just wanted I wanted to test out what it would look like to have a quick head dart around, and like maybe right here, right? So I'm just going to grab his head and his eyes, just those, and add a new layer there, and I'll call this like head darts, and say from frames 99 through 125, I just want to have a few little like looks around, right? Maybe from there to like here. He does a this. Copy that. I will say be careful in this to not do that middle mouse click drag thing, because what it's going to do is it's going to set, like these layers are additive to the layer underneath it, and what it would do is it would set a keyframe that is absolute on that value instead of, that's kind of hard to explain. Just the short answer is just right click and say copy and paste it here if you need to do that.
So it makes an overriding keyframe?
Yeah, it makes an overriding keyframe that is basically what's on this layer plus what's on this layer and puts it on the head darts layer.
Is that just a scripting, like a script thing? Like
No, it's like when you middle click, it's sampling where the world location and the world rotation is, and when I do that and hit S, it's putting that on top of it, so it's like a double transformation on it. So I just did like two little like head looks right here on this layer, and now I can see like that little bit of like head look over to there. Maybe I shift this earlier and make it a more noticeable head look back over to here. Uh-oh. I just messed that up. There. There. Delete. And delete. Okay. So just now I just added a couple of little head shakes where the character is looking around, right? So it's subtle, but then I got a little like look around that he's doing. That would be a lot of work in the graph editor, and I made it way less work here, right? So like how you want to use this, completely up to you. Don't feel like you have to use it, but I do think that there are parts of this that can be beneficial when you go back to start polishing an animation or splining an animation. Again, for me, like when I get into the graph editor, I really like having everything on one layer. A lot of times what I use this for is when I've gone through and made a lot of changes in the graph, and I feel like the graph editor is working perfectly, and then people come back and say, oh, you know what, the arm needs to be higher. And if I try to do that in the graph, it just messes everything up. I can just kind of do a blend between those, right? So is this helpful?
Yes, very much.
yes.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is sort of set a goal for the people who are going to be doing this revising pass. And the goal would be to, whatever piece you're revising for Project 3, sort of have your cleaner, clearer version of that by next week, by this class period next week, Tuesday of next week. And so that basically means if you're taking it back to blocking or blocking plus, where you already have your breakdowns in there, you're extracting whatever it is you want to, be to that point next week. And because what I would like to start doing next week is sort of a revision pass where we go through and comb through all of the curves on the hips and feet. We may even include the spine on that as well. And that will be the following week, right? We're going to do sort of that base part of your mass as a polish pass, or a splining pass at least. And so we'll just see how far we can get, but these are kind of going to be your milestone check-ins. So we have these five milestone check-ins, and the first one will be your before and your after of your revision, right? You took it from where it is when you opened it today to where it is on Tuesday, and just tried to make it better. Okay? Any questions on that?
So it's actually trying to make it better too, not just going through and getting it back to the starting point of making it better.
Yeah, I think that trying to make it better is like sort of this is an opportune time to do that. Like it may be that like, no, this is working great, and I don't need to make it better. And if that's the decision you make on some stuff, That's cool, but if there are, I have a feeling that as you're going through it, if you just ask yourself, could this pose be better? You're going to start making decisions that younger you, when you worked on it the first time, didn't think of, and it maybe is a slight thing, like a more dynamic hand pose or a cleaner silhouette on the hand or something. But just any opportunity, if we're going back to that level of it's not starting over, but going back to your blocking pass or your blocking plus pass, it just feels like that's a good opportunity to do one more push pass on it. Now, if you decide to go with the layers animation idea, that's fine too. I think that would be what you'll be doing there is looking for areas to push it, right? But a lot of the stuff that people are having issues with on cleanup is the subtle hitches in the graph. And I think that if we push for stronger poses, we can start getting cleaner arcs. So sort of starting to think of the way that would transition to. So I don't know if I think that answered the question. But each of these check-ins will each of these check-ins will count as one of the 5 criteria on the rubric. Okay, cool. I think that even if you're not in the second class or third class, hopefully, I felt like there was a lot of people's heads kind of popped up on the animation layer stuff and was like, wait, what? So that's cool. I hope you can use that in some way. Don't feel obligated to. Like some of you, I worked for a long time professionally without really doing much in the animation layers. So it's not like it's required. It's just another tool at your disposal. Yep, Zane?
I have a curiosity question.
Yep.
Why don't you show us that in earlier animation fundamentals? That just seemed like a really cool thing to learn earlier on.
I guess the animation fundamentals is one of those classes where my biggest goal in that class, like if I had to pick 3 things, let's pick 3 things. It's that people understand overlapping action, people sort of understand the 12 principles, and people stop being afraid of the graph editor. And I think that animation layers might sound to people like, hey, guess what? You don't have to use the graph editor. You can just use this thing instead. And I think it could have been helpful, but I think it could have also, it's also like the reason we start this class with set everything to step, we're going to just focus on our poses, is because a lot of people come in at this point also having not so clean of workflow practices. And so one of the biggest reasons I want to make sure we kind of understand the process as clearly as possible, and then use this as a tool to add on to it. It doesn't really replace any of those other things. It's just another way of thinking of those other things. So again, overlapping action, to me, layers almost make that more complicated, because if you go shifting one of your new layers, that doesn't make your arm transition differently. It just changes when that correction happens. You still kind of have to get all that back down and understand the graph editor. So really, I was kind of holding off until I felt like this wasn't going to sabotage some of those other best practices. But I wasn't necessarily hiding it from you either. I felt like I've mentioned animation layers to people. It's when you see the neat things they can do. I think it's very, the hardest part about animation layers is finding the time to use them, right? It's like with any new tool, you're like, oh, that's really cool. Now, when am I going to use that? How am I going to use that? And it's kind of just think about it periodically when you're like, this curve is being such a pain in the butt to edit. Hey, wait, I wonder if I could fix this with an animation layer. Save the file, try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, go back to the one you saved. And I think little bits at a time, you'll start to spot how they can be beneficial for your workflow. For me, they've been beneficial mainly as a corrective element. For Miguel, he used it as a core part of his animation process. And so that's cool. I mean, if you can do that, that's really cool. I have a hard time with that just because I like to think of the whole character as a unit. But I could totally see doing your lip sync animation on a layer. Like that would make complete sense. One of the ways I use it is I will do very vanilla lip sync animation my first pass through, and then I add an animation layer and just do my expression poses, like my smiles to my grimaces to my whatever, and that just sort of layers on top of the original lip sync. Or vice versa, I do those expression poses on my base layer and add lip sync on the addition layer or the correction layer. So, any other questions? All right. So I do think that this is kind of a neat tool. I'm going to show you one more thing with animation layers, and this may backfire on me. But I'm going to open up, I don't know if I can. Do I have them on here? I think I do. I think I have them on my desktop. I'm going to open up my game rigs. I think was I animating in here? Yeah, so here we are. I don't remember if this has the idle in there or not. So this was for my game animation, right? Let's see if I have so I have the jump in there.
Frame 600 or something.
Yeah. Game exporter, idle. So let's see if I still have my idle. I do. So this is actually really kind of neat because I have my character idling, right? And I could go in here and make an animation layer on top of this. And when we talk about keep alive in an animation, like some of you have probably already ran into this. Like your character is like talking and they go from like point A to point B and then everything freezes, right? Well, I have my character not freezing throughout this whole thing, right? Like she's just sort of staying alive for the whole thing. So I could add a subtle action on top of that, or even a relatively decent or relatively big action on this, and it adds some neat stuff to it. So I have all the controls selected, right? Let's say she's just sort of standing there and I want her to go to a completely new pose, right? So set a keyframe on 150, and then from 150 to say 170, I'm just going to move her to a completely new pose. So again, select it again. What? Oh. And then from, let's say, 210 to 220, she would go back to this pose. Right? And so that means on 170, all I really need to do here is just give her a completely new pose. And maybe she takes a step over to the side over here. Completely different posture. Let's say she's dodging something. Let's try that. So something goes like, flying by and she's like trying to avoid it, right? Like not getting hit by it. Okay. So, select all of it. Yes. I will copy that pose, paste it there. So now what we get, and it's not going to be right, we get this, then she goes to that, she's still staying alive, and then back to that. I think that's a little fast. So, let's sort of extend that back, right? But the rest of it I'm okay with, right? Like she goes from here over to here, And that didn't feel like a step, but that just is a few things I could animate through here to make it feel like a step. And I could go copy that one, paste it here, paste, and I could copy that one, paste it there, roll up on our toe. This, maybe her arms are already sort of flying up. And then maybe over here, I would copy all of these controls. S there again. I would copy all of those and put those here, but maybe exaggerate it just a little bit more. Go up to there. For some overshoot, right? And so now, like, just with a couple of keys, I get that, right? Which is still not perfect. There's still a lot right through here that I think is missing. She still needs that.
But you could do all of the Y translates on its own layer.
Mm-hmm. If you wanted to. I don't necessarily think I always want to do it that way, but I get you. But you could. Yeah, like I'm just sort of showing you like some ways to think about this, right? Oh wait.
Okay, so like, but if you were to like, okay, so if you were to like move a keyframe, say like on one timeline, and you were like, I don't want that here, I want it later, then you'd have to go into each of the timelines and rearrange it.
Right, and that's one of the reasons that I still usually bake this back down.
That would suck.
So like just with like these all 5 keyframes, so we get that. Now I still am missing like some overlapping action. I feel like in the head, like through here, definitely needs some extra attention, like this, and maybe here. Like I feel like this needs to continue past, and this needs to continue past. And so there's lots of little things I can still add to this, right? But that's definitely like something that you can make a correction on, and all of the rest of it is still staying alive, right? Like the character is always kind of moving still a little bit, right? So I think to take this in a completely different direction, I could mute that. And if I just wanted to do something like different or more simple maybe, again, I could grab all of this, add a new layer, and on this layer, I could just have her like wave at somebody, right? From this. So it would just be like this. So the entire layer is just her raising her hand to wave, keep it to there. Yeah, maybe like put some drag in the way it comes up. And then some drag in the way it goes back down. And of course, there's more detail on this, like overshoot once it gets down to here and stuff that I would put in. But that's kind of a rough idea of it, right? She just gets this like, right? And if I wanted to add even more of that wave in a different layer, I could say from 170 to 190, I could do just the wave parts in that. So just go ahead and set that curve for and then over here a bit more. I'll make it big. So now we get this. It's a little much, right? So we can then scale that wave layer down as much as we want.
That's awesome.
So you're kind of getting the idea, hopefully, of what this can add. One of the really cool things I think that this is beneficial about is with that arm wave, like some of the things that are missing in this, like when she waves, see how like still her chest and shoulders are? Well, I can fix that just in another layer. I can add this layer here, and on this layer, I can say through 190, I can add like as it goes back to here, kind of lean with it a little bit. Feels a little. So this is super fast, sloppy examples, but ways in which we can start adding this stuff into it. So, okay, questions?
Is there any way to hide what your face animation is doing? For example, if you were fixing something and you wanted to hide the face animation so you could add it breathing for a hair.
Yes, kind of. Let me show you. So what I'm going to do is, let's say this is what we wanted it to do, right? We're all happy with this. Merge all that down. Wait a second. So I think this will work. It may be, I may have to do something different for it to work, but let's try it. So I'm going to select all of my controls right here. I'm going to highlight all of this, right click, and I'm going to cut it. So now I've taken it out of that pose, and then my base pose should still be the bind pose, right? And so then I can add a new layer, and then we'll call this
Oh, so you're just taking all your base pose, cut it, yeah.
and then I'll paste those into here. Yeah, perfect.
Yoga time.
Interestingly, parts of it worked.
What's that, octopus pose?
So one of the things we can do, we have different types of, if we look at our animation layer here, we have different types of ways that this works. And right now our layer mode is set to additive. But I could set it to override, and now it's the absolute animation, and I can hide it. So the only problem with it is it doesn't look like my base animation is actually 0. Like it seems like over time it blends. I think that's probably where we're getting it. So what you'd want to make sure is on all of your controls and your base animation, all of that's zeroed out.
Why is there a pole there?
I just put that there so I'd know which way it was facing forward. So now the base animation is just 2 key poses on her idle, or on her neutral pose, and that's just because there's other keys before and after this that are messing it up. So now I turn it on, I should be able to see this, right? And I can turn it off and just see our bind pose. So I think what you're wanting to do there is if you're wanting to add like some random motion above that layer, like I could add a new layer here, and we'll call this noise, right? And let's say you wanted to add a little bit of noise layer here. Let's say you wanted to add a little bit of translate X to this. I could go here to 125, hit S, and then on this translate X, curves, or I'm sorry, keys, add key tool, just get like something like that. And if we watch this, by default, it's very small, but I could scale all of that up really big to where we're getting this, right? And so now that's all that's on this noise layer. And so when I turn on my wave animation, we still get that, and then you can turn down that noise layer to the amount that you feel like is the appropriate amount of like noise or whatever it is you wanted on it. So what that could do is like if you wanted to do one layer that's just a breathe cycle while your character is like angrily like looking around, then it would just add that breathe cycle on top of
Just
it.
said that. Yeah.
All right.
Now, where you before you had the wave, but then you had that sidestep, and then you have those 2 separate animations on different layers.
Yeah.
Would you do that as far as merging them back down? Yeah, you've got one hidden. You can't merge all of them. Is there a way to like create an iteration, I guess, so to speak, or would you just save it and then go do another one under a different save? Is that like a different?
You mean like a different step, or would you?
Yeah, we're like.
Or you're wanting a second animation?
Right.
Well, so it depends. I mean, you can, if you wanted to, like if you're doing this for games, like the way we're just doing it, like let's say if you wanted to use this method to create a fidget, you could export one version with that layer turned on and export one version with that layer turned off. You'd have to manually do that.
Okay.
But what you could also do, you can copy and paste keyframes to other points in the timeline. So you would have to do that on both layers. But yeah, you can do that with like...
Basically just not merge the layers, though, not merge it down.
Yeah, if you wanted to.
If you wanted to merge it down, could you also just set it on, just extend the timelines, put it on another set of keys, and then merge it down then you just have it on different sets of keys.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that works.
So I mean, there's so many different ways to work with this. I could get really crazy with it and show you that I'm not going to, because in all honesty, I'm not a huge fan of it. There's a tool inside of Maya under animation editors called the time editor. So the time editor allows you to save parts of your animation as animation clips, and then you can blend in and out of different animations. So let's say you have a character running and a character idling. It's just like you could in Premiere. You just put a blend in between those 2 clips, and it just blends in and out of it. And you can do additional animation layers in here as well. It's really handy for cleaning up motion capture, but really kind of confusing to me to work with in that like I'm crafting an action sort of way. Even for me, like the hand wave thing, like one of the reasons I still bake it back down is because, like, if you watch what her arm does when it goes up in the graph editor, it's still going to kind of feel like it's hitting a wall in spots. So let's go down to my base animation here. Frame that up. Where am I at? There we go. Base animation on my rotates. Is that not where that's at? Or is it still on here? Oh, sorry. It's on the Anim layer. I forgot. There we go. On my rotates. And I zero those out. You'll see like where she raises her arm up on rotate X. It really just feels like it kind of hits a wall there. And I still feel like it needs that extra push of like, you know, cleaning it up there to get some overshoot. And even here, like it hits really hard. I still feel like it needs that like that extra keyframe for easing in and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons I still like. For me, in the end, I want to use the graph editor as much as I can and not trust that as a replacement to the graph editor. But it does help you get stuff done quickly, and it helps a lot if you're correcting stuff. Like the way I was showing, like landing on top of the box and then back down to the ground. Like there's a really great example that Autodesk released, and it was a motion capture of a character getting onto a motorcycle, and his leg wasn't going high enough. So they just fixed that by having 2 extra keyframes where they made his leg go a little higher as he was crossing the seat. And so it's really easy to fix parts of your animation that aren't working exactly correctly, right? Like if you have your character stumbling in a weird direction, you can sort of change that direction as he stumbles, right? So it's definitely worth looking into, and it may or may not help you, but I thought it was worth talking about today. So, any other questions about any of this stuff? Yes. All right. I want to use that as the sign that the lecture's over. So the rest of the class is yours.
No, I didn't mean it like that.
Off the stage. No. Hopefully this is exciting for you. Like I think that it's nice to find sometimes that there's still these little hidden elements of animation.
The animation Easter eggs.
Yeah, it really is the Easter eggs. I think that it's going to be useful for some of you, and some of you, it may not be useful for a few more years. You may just be like, that's not something I'm ready, or I'm happy with my workflow right now. I'm not wanting to implement this in there. And like, just because I showed it to you doesn't mean you have to use it.
I need a new workflow, Greg.
You need a new workflow.
This is like a revelation.
Okay, awesome. Well, give it a try. Let's see if this helps. I definitely think it helps in the cleanup pass. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up and let you all do your thing. I'll be around to the end of class. If you have questions, I can swing by and check with you or whatever. Otherwise, the class is yours. So, I think Char has anything.
Yeah, that's fine. Just a couple things. Just like one is in that image.
Can you keep the one behind it?
Yeah, but they weren't like strictly like, I don't know if it would be suitable for like a fake sort of demo rail.
Well, they're just one of those review animation part of it. You just said if you haven't read some before, it's not have something.
Okay.
But I mean,
I do have things that I could probably show up.
if you want to run about it, you can pull some stuff together. If you want to follow it, then you can but I think it'll be a good especially mixing that and catching it up on like whatever.
And I can tell you it's portfolio work too.
Yeah. Get fast at it. Like a minute of animation sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
But whenever you do a rig, all you have to do is like,
Yeah. switch between different symbols
Yeah,
and.
it's super quick transitions.
Yeah.
I went through and watched some John Does, like, Char, and it wasn't even like, it was good poses, but it was very simple, like, there was a lot of like,
No, I've seen Johnny Does too, but it doesn't seem like the most intense.
yeah,
sort of
it's,
process.
and a lot of, even a lot of, like the Simpsons are like,
Yeah.
I wish the Simpsons, like,
Especially nowadays.
it's really just a way of delivering this comedic style.
Yeah, before I let you go, I just have something I want to show off. It's my fancy mom so far. I was at that. I just want to do that. This is just like middle slang.
I like that little arm thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
So I don't know if making this just like a music
I think it would stretch a little bit more.
Yeah.
The arm like that a little more. And I think the like jump scare thing, I think have to go back just a little bit, like a little bit further away from it. Play with the timing of the look around. Like
Yeah.
that's all the time for a little minute spots. Like if you do that and it's like, and then like and
Sort of startled.
yeah, it's like kind of breaking up some of that texture out of it. This is really cool. Yeah, I think you're totally selling the idea of I'm seeing the versions. I love the way the hand waggle.
Yeah, well, if you see my reference, I tried to be as animated as possible. Yeah, that's sort of a general motion.
I think you could have, you had it like, like a cop in or something
The
like
spider
that.
just sort of like, this is just a purely temporary spider thing. If I get another spider wriggle, that
Oh, that's cool.
that's go along with it.
Yeah, and even if it's just something like, or like in slowly lowering the ceiling. Like on the ground, start walking toward it slowly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, so many people are freaked out by spiders. It's very good.
Well, yeah, I just, want to go for it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Appreciate it. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in pouring it over.
There's just a lot of action a little bit on the stretch thing. Like his torso curves in one way, and
Stretch the other way.
And right now it's like it curves one way, and then stretches back to straight.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm just sort of playing with it. Yeah, I would love to.
A little shuffle.
Sneak away a little bit too. As he sneaks away, you can do a couple different things. You can start sneaking like this, and get like more low.
Yeah.
Or you can do the other way around. Start low.
Yeah.
I think that might be.
Like sort of personality. Yeah, that was all things else.
Yeah. This is a good fun. Thank you. You've got the knife to do some blocking back.
Oh yeah, there were whole poses I did. I started reading well. And so I was just kind of rework it. My leg, look at the light. It's getting a little.
Is he mad? He's trying to be like tapping on the glass window with
Really?
So
like all this is just
I had to find that character more than any other character ever, and I have to go back and look, but I would not be surprised if I didn't hit 2,000.
Yeah.
But I do probably. It is.
It's going pretty good. I was cleaning up this one, I also cleaned up project 2, which you can give me some insight on what you're thinking and stuff. I think I got the understanding of putting the elbow more, but I mean, which is what you think of the other.
One of the cool thing I would say maybe consider is like, maybe I just noticed it on like the darker colored leg. Like when he pulls that up on that second step and that step, like try to exaggerate it just a touch.
much.
Okay.
And maybe how much you have the need before we slams it down.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's kind of cartoony. I mean, it's not cartoony in the speed, but it's
And the actual rendering rules.
I think those are the only two things.
You got something, you get your exposure touch on it.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to push it enough before like I gave up. So I think I figured out why it was happening. I think it was because of the weight being too much or the interruptions. I think
Yeah, that's
but yeah, I got told head ball too turned out pretty well. So you can see it whenever you see it.
Oh yeah, the chest. The chest. Oh yeah, that's the drive. I saw it. I think the chest isn't really as obtrusive in the shot.
There was a setting you can make it like sideways movement.
Okay.
So
I think that's how. Like it doesn't feel like it's blocking his chin as much.
yeah. Don't know what the settings were, but I just clicked on some sliding and made some more. I'm like, okay, we'll just roll with them. So yeah, I think it's a lot better than what it was with the chest was so big. So pretty happy with how it's going. I'm about to just pocket it, move on. But how this one too, was going to ask about because I changed the idle a bit, so this is not like both the arms going at the same time. And then I changed it.
Is it on the side? So here's so if you look at how people run, right now it feels like her feet are hitting way out here in front of her, and then coming back to a little bit behind.
Yeah.
And I think like,
So just with the intensity of the actual strikes on the ground.
because you just grab off the feet curves and just slid the feet back a little bit, where it's more like she's kicking back, and her feet are landing just a little bit in front of her. Right now, when she, like, if you watch her run, so I feel like she's kind of like leaning back in her collar while she's running.
Yeah.
I think they're pushing the feet underneath her a little more.
I'll be pushing the feet up more for where it starts, whenever the contact is more like.
Yeah, I think that it's working, like the contact out there, but it doesn't feel like she's like kicking it back behind her.
Okay.
And I think
Shoving.
it feels like she should be maybe popping into the air and touch more. I think I would just sort of pull back. I think it's okay to have the same foot stride, but just sort of pull it back a little bit. Now, if that means her knees are going to hit a little bit mid, what you can do is push her the height of where her hips are, and get the Y translate,
Yeah.
sort of adjust that a little bit to lock her knees a little bit more.
So are you saying to like whenever she like puts her feet back, also backward?
I think it's just the entire so like the entire stride that she takes,
Yeah.
that stride feels like it's too far forward. So
Okay.
like if you just shifted the translate X key or whatever it is, where it's back a little more, and like it's more like her hips are over top of that run.
Okay.
Right now it feels like kind of back behind her.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? I think that, so it doesn't mess up the animation, so it's easier to shift the feet back. Probably right, probably will mess up the extent, like if you want her leg to go really straight on that stride. Right now, I think it's going straight, it's just going a little too far.
Yeah.
Like, I think the way you got that was skewing it forward.
Yeah.
And like it's sort of hitting out in front of her a little bit too much. And so when you're running, you're really running, like you're almost in front of your feet, but still like
So would it be better to keep or put the weights further in front?
So if you did that, it would mess up your, like you would pop forward to transition into.
Okay.
So really easier way to try this.
Okay.
I would say.
How do you feel about the landing? Because I can't tell because I tried making the arms go like that, but can't tell if it's really nice. It only happens sometimes. Really
Your
sucks.
feet are getting a little soft. And I don't know if that's an unreal or if that's
It's only like it was like one key frame, like it went from here and then it was maybe in contact. So I'd be like,
there's also a chance.
I think every time I've tried this one, that one feels like it's off better into the height. So, I don't know. I think this was.
Maybe a little sharp with like on spot.
Yeah, I think it was me trying to compensate for that.
They wouldn't do this. See if that. I think your kids are
Yeah.
It's going to go a little better. So you can kind of see that does feel.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of good. It is a good punch. The only thing I would change on it is on the foot stop. I feel like the foot's hitting the ground about the same time the punch is. So yeah, get that foot out there first and then
Okay.
and then I think the same thing, it's just coming back. Keep that foot, as your hips go back, keep that foot on the ground and then have it push her and then catch up later.
Okay. Okay.
Because see, I kind of like slide back with her hips.
Right.
I think that's going to let you like throw it up, punches, comes back, and then I think it's the extent that chain reaction.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good goal.
Thank you for the help. I'm trying to pick this up at the time that I have before the next
And
one.
that run is definitely looking better
Yeah.
than the stride.
Yeah. I
It's
think.
now just where it is before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it changes.
Sweet. Thank you.
Sure. You ready to figure it out or okay for non-machine? So everybody is a little bit so let's try and control this. The real frustrating thing was that saves the profile mode and all this stuff. So that means if they can work on it, you may not have that button at home, but it should be on the profile. You see the save. Like I was like, I haven't carried anything on it, but I just like the style. Yeah, let me know if you have find issues or anything like that. It looks like it's just kind of going. It looks like, I mean, is there mesh underneath? It's like the shorts. Yeah, see, well, that's annoying because there shouldn't actually be mesh underneath there unless, yeah, I mean, well, maybe it's fine. There we go. So, one of the tricks to that, I wouldn't worry about it now. But one of the things we could do is just select all of those faces and just hide them. Most people, that makes me wonder if there's not a primary layer to have other clothes. People are possibly they're going to get in the prison where we can do like pants instead of shorts or licenses. Because usually, like anything underneath the clothes, if you're never going to use that, a lot of rigs will just delete those polygons, so you don't have those anymore. Why you would use that is if you decided later you wanted to simulate our clothes instead of having skin. So I can kind of zoom the body underneath it, right? But if it keeps going through and then showing it on here, we'll just grab all those faces underneath the pants and just or technically keep them
Because you're updating your active controls. That's also why you
There's some training that there's similar composition. Yes, I'm familiar with composition. Like, I guess one of the things to think about is change the composition. It's not a composition, but he is have like pass out on this side, and then like on the other side, you can have like yes. And there's also your rotational beings. But they always use it to show like this interesting isolation. Like this symmetry, all the way. It's almost like a and so I think in this case, you do it's symmetrical. There's things you're saying. That would make a good shot. But if you play around in there, mess with something, suppose that camera and see what it looks like when you just look at people and like look more like the example you have, kicking in his chest off. That was very bad. I think I would consider in this one if you want to do a camera. I think you want to have a step forward a little bit, and then like a cut to a different camera, and then like walk into the shot and do I don't know, that's just like the whole shot into the temple, and they start to the symmetry may start to
Okay.
the introduction control
Right.
right? And then like when he gets all the documents that walk in.
That was cool.
Those videos that I shared with he has a really good video because you can still keep her at NK and then have her just go to IK and it sort of shows you how to do that unless you make it
switch. Yeah, that was like he has a really weird method that I haven't tried before. I mean, I tried it, but I got just a really sloppier version of what he did.
Okay, great. So I shut down the timeline on this one, because I hit the button and then it literally shut it.
Are you
There's no point. I just look at
There we go. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Is
Wait,
it- Okay, so we can always bring some of that back. Windows and UI elements, and so that works.
But yeah, somehow I switched over to the animation one.
So the other thing is listed on the side here, though, if you go Windows, and then UI elements. Hold on, so it's there you go.
For some reason, WebEx is being blocked by the system admin. I've actually got the error pulled up on my screen right now. It'll let you on it, you just have to tell it okay that it's being blocked by the admin like 5 or 6 times for whatever reason.
And it's on that computer?
Yeah.
That computer is bugged. It may just be that computer, but were you able to interview any of you able to get on WebEx? Were you able to get on the WebEx and watch what I was doing? Because Zenny was, but he's gone on WebEx. Because I'm really just that computer that's something. How y'all doing?
A couple things. First, I was want to talk to you about this. Last week, but you told me to wait until today is the idle run thing in Unreal that I have the idle right here in the run right here, but when I try to stop running, it goes back into the middle of the idle pose, which is super weird. It's doing this and then it's going like that. And I have it at the start of the idle pose and the character runs pose, but like.
Yeah, well, I think it's still gonna, I think it's popping back kind of quick and show you how to fix that transition a little bit. It's actually,
Yeah, totally.
so what you have is, this is a preview value, and it's previewing, it's blending back to this, right? I think probably what you can do, blueprint here, and then install. It's how it transitions from here.
Because like, I had to do a different idle pose. Does that look better than idle pose?
I don't remember what the one.
It was just like me doing like this, but both my feet were like stuck together and everything.
Yeah, this does look. So who was having that issue?
I'm not sure because like normally it would have me it would just show the idle pose in here anyway.
Yeah, no, it's the way it transitions from A to B. But there's a way we can.
Your choice is you can move her down where she's further, we're going to be back
So we look it up on Google.
That's what I would do, so you can split it in kind of back and forth motion here. Yeah, that'll work.
See which it turns back into your.
Because like the punch works, and I was able to do it like that instead of like clipping. Is some up there, like in the event that it's changed?
Well, for the IKF users,
Especially the speed in which
I was
it's
just set a transition
I wonder if it's
That's right. That you can still do. Back to the bar. Oh, damn it. I guess let's be. Yeah, you just do that.
I don't think you can select one. Because like runs work fine, it's just like on the end, it just goes like, starts seeing some other.
well, I mean, that's actually part of it. It's the only way to really fix it. Yeah, it's not going to blend back to the beginning of your so what's happening though is it'll blend in here, or from wherever you are in your run, right, back to the idle. When you're stopping and you're on here, the idle blend is really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how to make that blend. Maybe it's actually in the blend space.
I mean, that's the only Char will jump in and punch. So Robert,
Hi.
Maybe.
Your blueprint is so weird.
It is. I don't like. And I'm really.
There are some good things with it, but then like at the same time, there's like this weird chance.
Yeah.
I think it's better.
Scope has been around. I honestly feel like Unity is a lot easier to use.
It can be. I have to say. I think interpolation time when it gets input, it can be used this time to interpolate to target. Used for smooth interpolation. Let's try. And save that. And let's see, like it'll still happen. It'll still blend back to that. But I think maybe the blend back to idle.
I mean, it's still like sometimes doing.
Yeah, and I mean that's just kind of how I will do that. Like if I did this at one, let's see if that makes it really. If I think I can
If
hold
this
a second.
keeps doing that though, will it affect my grade?
No, I'm not gonna do that. There we go. So that's the part where it's. That's not what we want, but that is what we're fixing. So that says that that doesn't change. I mean, what it's doing is correct. It's the rate at which it's doing that. Because it should blend back to where it is in the idle that it kind of left off. Right? Part of the issue now, stuff like this, that's your new idle pose, it's
Yeah.
when you punch, you'll blend into the idle punch, pose with three punch, and then back. So that's like,
Yeah.
but like at the end of your run, like that's okay. Like one of the things you are getting here though is like your idle pose has some style to it. And the feet being pushed far apart, like wide apart, like means that you see how wide the feet are? When he starts running, they go closer together, and then when he stops running, they go far apart. And so like, one of the ways you can do that is maybe end the run, spread his feet out just a little bit, or angle his toes out a little bit, because right now they're pointing perfectly Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, those still, like, it doesn't play.
What do you mean by
Like, it went, like, to this.
Yeah, it was like cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something better. The transitions at the beginning and the end are a little slow, and the fact that it's like when I click the punch,
Yeah.
it's like almost a second before it actually punch. So that's really not the best like reaction time. I think you're spending a lot of time getting into that thing before he punches. And so like, if I need to knock something out immediately, gameplay wise, it probably would be so just click now, and then there's where so it's like you can shorten the beginning of that animation and make that part happen faster, and you're probably
Okay, and one more thing, because virtual engine, even though it is not that thing, the flash. This is the play blast I had for my thing for my body mechanics.
Jumps, he lands, and then like a slide forward. You see that?
Yeah, it's still
Yeah, it goes on something. To me, the walk was kind of slow.
That's just because like it's not
Yeah, so I'd say I was speeding up. I use like these kind of walk here.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any way I can speed it up?
You just scale the keyframes closer together and it's probably the easiest. Or you can use it What's up, partner?
How did you create the motion?
Oh, it's great. I like all of it. All this. Is that what you?
This is that's about it.
Oh, and then you look at the middle thing, and drag it there.
This was here, but then you're still.
Okay, and also, I'm setting audio in, because I thought it was import.
It is file import. But it may not work if there's it has to be a way that it has to be not the 32-bit, it has to be 16. So if it's the 30-bit, and then just Premiere reacts to that. Try that too. Yeah, so if you open up that audio clip in Premiere, and then the next one goes away, you should be able to export that.
That's where it's which
16-bit was instead of 30-bit. For some reason Premiere isn't, or mine isn't recognized as 30-bit. Like, I feel like a 32-bit rate is a text file online.
I still use the buttons because you're like 2D dialogue, and I heard the 3D dialogue.
I mean, your 2D dialogue, think of that as your comment. I mean, you learn stuff on that, right?
Yeah. But then also, I was like, I might take it and do it more of like that, because like,
Oh, that's fine.
it's fine, I should work around here, it's more focused on like,
I have you back in 3 minutes. I know, I was worried you started tampering around with the 2D, you know what that leads to, you know, it's a gateway. It's a gateway to concept. Oh, so, well, you can't do that, that's just those keyframes, so not your entire animation. So, what you can do, let me show you the curve over here, you have to select everything, you're going to have a button for that.
I don't have a button for it.
So you probably should make that everything you do, you just highlight all of this. So seeing them scale. I messed it up, but I can scale the animation down to where it's fast. So once you've selected all of those, as long as you get the keyframes all lined up, it's pretty easy. It should just okay. We'll run downstairs real quick and grab a lunch. Let's go, man. rest of the scenes. Up the best you can, and if comes back on, I'll chat with you. I think it's just like, we're going to talk about things to be switch animations from pop up and stuff. We just kind of stuff those in as different tasks. You don't always understand all the questions, but that's just but it's not going to. Ooh. That's exciting. I got access to old ECGC files again. Because I've been wanting to see them. I've never watched like the original presentation, and I had to sign this like thing that said it's okay to record. It'll give me some options to do. It's okay to record them. And I'm like, wait, you still have those? Can I have them? I think I just got a week to them. Y'all already seen it. It was a post talk, but I didn't know what to call that. So you think you want to teach? I actually got it last summer. It's the same company that was doing the and they sent me in one of their rooms. So I can test
This is and also it was a weird show.
It was high school drama, right? Except some of the characters are characters from anime, even not to say for anime. So it was like this like girl and her like father and boyfriend with a monster. But it was like dealing with like you were caught smoking in the boys' room, like it was like those kinds of drama. It was extremely gratuitous, like anime girl like character. And I was like, no, I don't know that I really want. It was great. It was really good, like funny show. You really could be like, like this is really fun.
Do you want that to represent our
Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't bad. It wasn't inappropriate. It was just like. It was like kind of like crude jokes. And like, but I'm fine. I don't. It just wasn't worth. I wasn't excited about the project for it to be worth my time for that one. But Johnny Test, on the other hand, like that's kind of a cute little show. Like that's a fun project. So he said if you've never read anything or worked with him, you have. It's just not been named. And so you have stuff on the show that are very character. Just but I'm if you can't find the
It's always, if I wanted to work for a very specific project, I would be like, yeah, I want to cross the but I know that I'm not fast enough and I can hold on it. So if I did contract work just 3, I always opt for this instead. Yeah, there's it's like the only person I so if anybody else is interested, he's contacted me a few times and I get back to their desk. If I see one that I think will cost me cool.
Hey, Greg, can I use this? I know it's not humanoid. Because I was going to have this like claw and like stumble. You know what? It's kind of like those cartoon characters.
More challenging. Trying to like how it's like. Yeah. We have to show that. I'm not going to take this. How do you show this working in happening?
It's got me for it.
Yeah, the major task is like that killer, and then the 3 steps.
You gotta sell me on it though. You
Yeah, Andy has like the plastic screen.
I know, okay, stop, are you crying? Oh, no, don't make me watch that. And now I have to get rid of this. And now I have to go watching it.
This is still like.
A trainer would think that. A trainer would not. A trainer would not consider moving real fast.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alright, so you're bleeding into the lungs. Down.
Would it be easier to fill up that, hand info on that one?
You can go right there.
Just lift that one up a little bit so it doesn't run into the box.
And
Where would that
then
go?
it will show a little bit more anticipation. How far down it goes.
So like major task 1 is but definitely polished.
Right.
Yeah, actually, she reminds me of that, what's it called?
And yeah, we're having because at these keyframes to do it.
So you'll have to retype my script.
So that's where it is. And that one.
Actually answering the question. I'm just writing words. I just put Ringer, rotate, better. Yeah. I noticed that earlier. I was gonna just make one huge box and just say elevator. What?
It's not communicate. So you can't communicate because you're communicating to us too.
Okay, so see, if you look at it, she's going at 6, 8.6, I just put Ranger for all of them. I don't
Yeah, like,
need
what do you
anything.
do?
Right there, posting
Like, you should be looking, everything should be in the bar.
Can I just put cry for the rest of it?
Yes.
Cry and winner.
Cry and winner, yes.
Not yet.
Honestly, usually when I
It makes a lot of joy and I'm gonna go work.
Negative.
like when I never watched an episode one of the time. When I watched it in the movie theater.
Accentuate. I know these
I feel like my bias is just completely changed. Oh, no. Kai wasn't always my favorite, and then I watched that, I was like, dang, Kai's my favorite. And then Tanya is out here playing the guitar, playing the drums, doing literally everything.
So what I did there is I just gave away my data scale one out to switch so it would make it No, I took, you know how on this one we wanted it to switch between that's exactly what I just gave it time to shift. So that way I know that it's going to be so that's what I did. And that's how I make it.
Wow.
I'll let Maya take care of that. It's just going to be a route. Yeah, it's that.
Oh, Jason has a whole blog series on this channel.
Okay.
This one's literally just about him working out. One minute, one love photo. Next. And then one done, I enjoy working. And then one he said he came to the workout. It's smart. I think we go trade this. This is what I want to trade. On this. Today I came to work out. Oh, I thought we were and then it has okay. We love this. Stand up, my equal key. John, for you to change it. Okay. This is crazy.
Do it.
No, we don't have his face. It's covered up. You can see the lips.
Like, I know what you want.
Stop it. Stop it. You can see the lips.
Sarah, help me.
What do you want to that anyway?
Yes, he is. He's trying to talk.
I think I find him attractive because he has an undercut.
You found that out.
No, I
found it.
Okay,
I'm trying to teach you as every other person on this planet.
Oh. Okay, yeah. He has like this.
My shoes and they only need one knot. I don't have to have boxes anyway.
I can see there's 3 problems. I'm ready.
Sure, go ahead.
I know, but I can see I can see girls.
I did.
Okay.
I'm delegating, yes.
Of course,
Everybody can access that.
No one knows else.
Look at him.
And those times are available.
Okay, he has
The
an
whole reason I
Wow.
so that I could leave. And now I still have to stay here and have to stay here for 4.
I love this is like thank you.
So.
I think it's cute. I like the size of
Sure.
it. I like how this really has dimples. That's my favorite. Thanks. One for her.
We just started cutting around.
Obviously, I didn't need to
You're reenacting our group.
I didn't even look.
I'm trying to keep going with this. I'm trying to I'm not. Actually, I just want to take it up and go straight up. I just want to put it over. Yeah, I understand that one. I'll have to click it. I put the info on like Saturday and I named myself. I can do things on it.
It's real, and then stick figures, and you can create your own square cross. Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. sent y'all the picture of the one that I got.
Yes. It looks like they're very animated.
See?
Okay.
How did it work for you? I don't know, I just clicked it, it instantly opened it.
And Johnny is still Johnny is my mom.
Johnny never really did.
But
I was gonna tell him.
I think he has like at least one. That's why Johnny has one.
I'm visuals, whatever the hell that is.
I'm interpersonal, I just sit on the TV.
It's like, and all of the DC. It's like,
I have 2 minutes. I like to name my own, but I'm not putting it.
the same umbrella.
It's so black hat. It's probably tries to make the best argument to get to the idea.
I'm the Ninja Burrito as a counselor.
I'm the yellow hat. I get everything else aside. What are the benefits of this plan?
If I scroll down past the picture of the stick figures and the hats,
There is an example of how they each hat would talk.
hang on, let's see if it'll work. Mine doesn't work. Where is this man getting these links from?
Why is it sound so Red hat acknowledges feelings, fear, disappointment, enthusiasm, and expresses intuition. What?
The thing.
Doing my thing.
What is this?
Red hat would say things like, "This suggestion makes me angry."
This one makes me mean. This I count.
Black hat would say a lot of numbers. Like revenue was up 8.5% last quarter.
That's why I'm not.
Black hat.
And
Blue hat would say things like, "Time to yell at the session," or "We will discuss this matter for 1 hour." Green hat would say things like, "Are there other options?"
Yeah, that is not at all the thing I was about to say.
Let's see, is there other links?
I clicked the second time and there was,
Oh, that one.
yes, one I got.
But I can do that. I'm still black hat. I'm still black. Stops the difficulties and dangers and things not me alone. Probably the most powerful useful hat for all of us overused. Let's see what's smart.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I was like, no, it was instantly. Got all the money.
Oh, it's a survey. I'm not good. Last time I done it, I actually won it. Here, random beats. This time they're giving away beats and beats from the 31 on it.
I've asked all questions, but I'm not contributing shit to the school. There's an article going around saying that Jagged Little Pieces album was our generation's version of Baby Shark. Jagged Little Pieces, so you know like it's like raining on your rainy day and you're not already there. It was irritated. It was irritated from Jagged Little Pieces. People that did the song.
Juice, are you from Juice is scary bunch.
Yeah, there it is. It's not that cute. Jagged Little Pieces. It's ironic. This is our generation's version of Baby Shark. Yeah, but they need so this one is full album is like a Jagged Little Pill. So that all of us have heard everything we're talking about. It's just straight lines.
Unless it's like one of those guys.
Oh, she's only if I talk everyone. That's all. That's all.
What? I'm trying to cover up my hole. You are going to go there, exactly. That's what happens when you're a trainer. You don't get either if you won't accept that you keep this move back to the same place. It's not like it's now wait, so you're not gonna equally to the back. He wants to cover a final and we can't let that.
It's first. It's your biggest one.
Right, I'll let you do that. We don't know.
So what's hilarious is I think there's a chance this computer's been recording for the last 30 minutes. It has.